Welcome to our study of the book of Hebrews. Thank you for joining us for this week's lesson. As you are aware, we've got two other episodes that we did where we were looking at the context of the book of Hebrews, at the message in the book of Hebrews. Now, today we're going to focus more on chapter 1. Chapter 1, I called it a ball of fire. You know, it comes out heavy with deep lessons and deep quotations, which cannot be just understood by reading the surface or by scratching the surface. One needs to dig deeper and understand what Paul was trying to communicate to the Jewish Christians. Our memory text for this week is Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. I read from the NIV version. In these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir over all things, and through whom also he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. Now, verse 1 to verse 4 is one verse in the Hebrew Bible. And it's got lots of stuff. It's pregnant with meaning. If you look at Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1, and you look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, if you look at John chapter 1, verse 1, have certain things in common. One of the things that is there is that they talk about the beginning. They're looking at what happened at the beginning. Hebrews 1, verse 1 says, in sundry times, God spoke, and Genesis says, in the beginning, God. John 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, the Word was God. So all these are talking about God. They assume two important things, that God speaks and God is. They don't doubt that. They know that God speaks and God is. Now, chapter 1, Hebrews is focusing on trying to convince the Jewish Christians that Jesus is God. That Jesus is God. We'll start off with looking at the heading, in these last days. In these last days. That God speaks to us in these last days through his Son. Now, the prophets of old believed in the last days, and whenever they spoke about the last days, they not only spoke about war, about famine and things like that, but they also spoke about a person who would come and fulfill prophecy. So when they spoke about a child born in a manger, when they spoke about the scepter will not depart from his house, when they spoke about, someone coming to redeem the Israelites, they were pointing to somebody, and they referred to those days as last days. So when Jesus came and fulfilled those prophecies according to Hebrews, he was fulfilling them in the context of last days. That was the beginning of last days. In the book of Daniel prophesied about Christ's first coming, about the dying on the cross, and about Jesus establishing his kingdom. Paul and the apostles believed that the first advent and dying on the cross was fulfilled in Jesus. That was the thrust of Hebrews, that all that prophecy that they were waiting for was fulfilled in Jesus. And what was left was establishing his kingdom. So when Jesus came for the first time and he was fulfilling those prophecies, one can say we're drawing near to the last days. So we're now living in the last days, and there are many prophecies that have been fulfilled and some that are going to be fulfilled as we speak. The second point that comes up is that God spoke through prophets, but now he speaks through his Son. Now, God speaks through his Son. It sends a certain message. God spoke through prophets, through Malachi, through Leviticus, through the book of Psalms, through Samuel. God was speaking about his love and about his plan of redemption. In all these books in the Old Testament, he was trying to show them what plan he had for them. And whilst he was speaking through the sacrificial system, whilst he was speaking through Hosea, taking the wife of Edom, whilst he was speaking through Ezekiel, acting up and lying on his side and doing many other things. He was all trying to show them the plan of salvation. Jesus came, he then fulfilled all that. So when the Jewish Christians were looking at Christ, they were seeing Christ being a fulfillment, God speaking and answering the questions, in finishing the puzzle, in making the whole picture complete. So God spoke through his Son. And what Paul is trying to do is try to elevate Christ. He's actually elevating him above the prophets. That, God spoke through prophets, but now he's speaking through his Son. So Jesus is now elevated above the prophets. And Paul is trying to show that he is just not a prophet. So Christ, looked to the Old Testament for what would say prehistory, and they looked to Christ for the answer. So they needed the Old Testament to understand the New Testament, and they needed the New Testament to understand the Old Testament. Only as those two were read together were they able to come up with the correct picture and understanding of what Christ came to do. The next message that will form the last part of this audio is that Jesus is described as the radiance of the Father's glory, or the radiance of God's glory. Now, Paul is trying to show that Jesus is God. In the first part, he's showing that Jesus is better than the prophets. Now he's taken a step further. He wants to show that Jesus is God, is greater than, the angels. Now, in this specific verse, he says Jesus being the radiance of God's glory, the express image of God. Now, I want to look at just 3 sections before I conclude. Being. The word that Paul uses when he writes that who being is a word that in Greek denotes eternal, timeless existence, continual existence. Its related verb is found in the book of John chapter 1, verse 1, in which we have the word was. In the beginning was. That word does not talk about Christ coming into existence, but that in the beginning Christ was already there. Now, to cement this thought, Jesus actually uses these terms when he says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am." So, just by using the word being, Paul emphasizes that Christ was there before the beginning. He is God. Point number 1. Point number 2, he points at the radiance of God's glory. Now, he's saying that Christ is like the rays of the sun. You may not see the sun, but you see its ray. You see the tension of the sun. You can only see the sun as you see its rays. So he's saying we cannot see the Father, but we see Christ. So God made himself visible through Christ. Still, he's saying that Jesus is Lord, or Jesus is God. The last part is he's the express image of God. What does this mean? The words that I use there denote, a seal, which is used to certify documents. That shows that what the seal is, the instrument, is what is seen on the document. Basically, what God's character is what Jesus' character is. What Paul is saying is what God is, Jesus is. So in summary, as I end this part of our lesson of chapter 1, Paul is saying that Jesus is more than what you think he is. He is greater than the prophets because God now speaks through the Son. Jesus was always in existence. Jesus is the glory of God. Jesus is the actual image of God. So Paul is bringing the Jewish Christians to the thought and understanding that the fulfillments that we're looking for in the Old Testament, whatever you were doing and looking forward to in the Old Testament, has found its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading of his word.